All right, good evening. We are live on the Mile High Huddle podcast, where we're going to bring in our Facebook groups as well. That's Mile High Huddle and Mile High Huddle Podcast, your daily Denver Broncos coverage. And while those are coming in, we will let it breathe just for a moment on YouTube. So hello, everybody on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, mostly YouTube. Thanks for being here with us today. And welcome in, everybody. This is the Thursday night, no head-to-head edition, just two talking heads tonight of the Mile High Huddle podcast. My name is Scott Kennedy. You might know me from Broncos for Breakfast, or as they refer to me on this show, Mr. Producer. I will be sitting in for Chad Jensen tonight. Chad will be back next week, and I'm with my good friend, Zack Kelberman. Zack, how are you doing this evening, my friend?
One point of clarification, Scott, you're the deacon of the podcast. You don't sell yourself too short, but I've been better. I'm dealing with a little bit of a, cold, flu, whatever right now, but I'm pushing through. It's my MJ flu game for y'all on a bye week. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I said we might keep it just a little tight with the bye week, and some folks maybe want to watch some pretty good football with the Green Bay Packers and Detroit Lions. That's a pretty salty Thursday night matchup, Zack. And one of the guys, and we'll get into it, I titled this Pat Surtain II gets a boost for his Player of the Year campaign, his Defensive Player of the Year campaign. He is actually, if you look at FanDuel right now, he is third. The odds-on favorites is third. Number one is TJ Watt, because the name recognition, he's having an okay season. I mean, it's still better than most, but not for TJ Watt. It's actually like kind of a down year for TJ Watt right now. And then Xavier McKinney and his 7 interceptions playing for the Green Bay Packers is number 2, and then Pat Surtain on FanDuel.
It's all about the big plays, Scott. We were talking about that before the pod started. I asked you how many pick sixes McKinney has. He has 0. PS2 does have 1. For my money, you're right. You nailed it. Name recognition. It'll probably end up going to TJ Watt because he's won it before. He has more popularity in the NFL, but it's all about the splash. And if we're even discussing it on a micro level with the Broncos, you could argue Nick Bonito has better odds than PS2 because he's making more of those splash plays like the pick 6 last week.
There's an old saying in Major League Baseball. When Nick and I do Broncos for Breakfast, we are constantly using other sports cliches to discuss and compare and do football. And the old saying in baseball was, you get the All-Star game the year after you deserve it, because it takes a little bit of time for people to catch up to the fact that, hey, you're having a monster season. And that's where I think Bonito is. Bonito is in that, as people are going, it's like, hey, who are the top edge rushers this year? People will whip out the normal names. They'll say, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett and the Bosa boys. And, oh, wait a minute. Who's this guy that's a half a sack off the lead? How do you spell that name? Is it 1 N or 2 T's or Nick what? Is that Nico Bonito? Yeah, he's right there. So I think it'll take him a year. Like, the splash play on Monday Night Football did a lot for him, with that interception, right? Wasn't that was interception, when a fumble return, interception, touchdown, 6 points for the defense. And then people look up like, oh, wait, who's this Nick Bonito guy? Wait a minute, he's got this many sacks. So it might be enough to get him a Pro Bowl nod this year, but I think it really springboards him for the next season, even though he deserves it this year.
That's a really good point, Scott. I never really considered, because it happened with PS2. We knew about him in Broncos country. Mm-hmm. We knew when he was drafted how good he was, but he didn't hit that national landscape until pretty much last season. And even now, people are still kind of, Sauce Gardner is better than PS2. That's all, phooey. But if Nick Bonito leads the league in sacks and he keeps producing those, he's going to at least put himself in the conversation. But if name recognition, if that's what it boils down to, then PS2 would have the better odds there.
Yeah, and I think it's why I'm just thinking, hey, can Bonito make the Pro Bowl, or first or second team All-Pro? Because if he doesn't, he'll probably be on some preseason lists as people reflect back at what they were at last year's numbers. Now, we always reflect back with David McElrath, and David, it is great to see you. I don't always get to say thank you for everything that you do for the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm behind the scenes. We see it all the time, obviously. And he says, good evening, Broncos country. Zack and Deacon Scott. Thank you, sir. He says, hashtag God bless USA. Hashtag 10-7 plus. That's right. I think you're 10-7 feels like the floor right now. Let's go, Bo. MHH for life. There's too many of them there. I'm going to finish with hashtag Knicks for 6 and SEAL Team Knicks. And, I at the beginning of the season, Zack, it's one of the things I'm kind of kicking myself about is where is this roster? The offense, I think, is rounding into form about where we expected it to be. It's becoming kind of average, okay? Which, if I'm average with this running back group, this tight end group, this wide receiver group, and a rookie quarterback, if I'm knocking on the door somewhere around 15th in the NFL, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with the trajectory of where this team is headed, Zach.
Yeah, I think the season's already a success. Chad and I talked about that last week. Like, who thought the Broncos would be 8-5 at this point? Bo Nix would be an offensive rookie of the year, should be favored, and the Broncos control their own playoff destiny. The season is already a W, and the more they stack, the bigger W it will be, Scott.
And so where the offense is not that big a surprise for me. It started off kind of slow. I do believe in Sean Payton as an offensive play caller, et cetera, et cetera. So that is on the trajectory I'm thinking it was. I had absolutely no idea in my wildest dreams we'd be talking about a top 2 or 3 defense in the NFL after 13 weeks, leading the NFL in sacks. And for me, that's the difference between my prediction of 6-11 at the beginning of the season and 8-5, and right now 10-7 as a floor. And as I got to see this stuff stacking up, are you eating a bunch of crow at 6-11? Yeah, but I'm also 11-2 picking games once I got to see these guys play and how good a job Vance Joseph has done to put these pieces in place. And there's no hesitation. We talked about where are the athletes on this team. Is this team blessed with a ton of speed out there on defensive side of the ball? Probably not. Do they look fast and swarming because they know where to be and they are turned loose and free to play with wild abandon? Yeah, they do. And Brandon Jones has been an upgrade over Justin Simmons.
Agreed.
I watch Justin Simmons every week. I watched Justin Simmons like y'all did for the last 3 years, and Brandon Jones is playing better than Justin Simmons did last year for the Denver Broncos.
I give him his flowers every week, VJ. He surprises me. As long as he doesn't put Levi Wallace on the field too often, please get healthy soon, Riley Moss. Then, the defense will take care of itself with the pressure and the sacks they're creating. On offense, Scott, one factor, we'll get to Sam in 1 second. The offensive line, what I didn't see coming. I thought, the run blocking is what it is, but they're second or third, I can't remember, in pass block win rate through 13 games. So I didn't see that coming with a rookie quarterback. That's also a big reason for their success.
Yeah, for sure. And McGlinchey has become the guy that you paid. Whereas, last year, his first year, and it's hard to change teams and live up to your big money contract. Again, I kind of learned this going back to baseball. Every single player that goes to the New York Yankees seems to struggle their first year because they're getting paid more than anybody else has even thought, because they always break the bank on everyone else. The Dodgers doing that. It's a huge market with a ton of pressure. And they always struggle their first year. A-Rod struggled. Mark Teixeira struggled. You see that translate where guys come into a new system, big money, and it takes them a little bit of time to adapt. Mike McGlinchey is playing really, really well right now. Getting back to Sam, appreciate your patience, Sam. He says, evening, guys. It's kind of weird and odd for a team to have their bye week this late in the season, but it's definitely a benefit, I feel. Hope the Broncos get their bye week between 10 to 14 consistently. Go Broncos. It is a benefit when you are playing well.
And you're
if
healthy.
You can survive to this point,
Exactly.
It's absolutely a benefit. You've won 3 straight. If you're losing a little bit, you're like, golly, we could have used that bye week a few weeks ago to get some boys healthy out there. But right now, it's like you've got all the momentum of the world. You carry it over, and it was one of the things that Bo Nix was asked about, Zach, about this momentum. Are you a little worried that it could throw your rhythm off a little bit? And he's like, well, what are we going to do about it? We can't do anything about it except prepare and get healthy and go play hard. So appreciate you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. I thought that was a really good answer by Bo Nix. And if you could physically survive it up until this point, then yeah, the bye is a good. But if you lost half your team and you have a mash unit out there, then a week 14 bye doesn't matter. You like it more toward the middle of the year, but like Sean Payton said, he hasn't dealt with a week 14 bye in his career. Couldn't come at a better time though, Scott. With Bo Nix a little beat up with the back, Riley Moss, and so on and so forth. Even Nick Bonito was limping after Monday night, so they need the rest.
Yeah, they do, and it's It's good. I think the Colts have the same bye week. I think they're off this weekend
Yeah.
too. I love Shane Steichen. I think he's a great coach. I just don't think Anthony Richardson really scares your defense right now.
As a runner, not as a passer.
Yeah, I think your defense is too good for him, that they're gonna have trouble scoring more than 17 points at most. The Duchess, Michaela, coming in, hot pink, red hot. Appreciate you, Michaela. Again, this is my chance to say thank you. Haven't seen you since when was the meet and greet? It was in mid-September, so I haven't gotten to really say thank you since September. But she has a couple of questions here. One, who has the better odds of going further in the playoffs, the Commanders or Broncos? Let's hit that one first.
It depends who the Commanders play, who the Broncos play. It depends on matchups, but overall, it's kind of biased answer for me, Michaela. I like the consistency of which Bo Nix is displaying. I think Jaden Daniels is a little inconsistent. He's been a little up and down. I'm not the biggest believer in Dan Quinn as a head coach, whereas I think Sean Payton is one of the best head coaches in the NFL. But it comes down to matchups. But if the Broncos could just get there, Scott, I think both teams would be happy getting to the playoffs with rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to, again, it boils down to matchups. This isn't a question, Michaela, of who's the better team. Who, if they played each other right now, I'd pick the Broncos, and I don't care where it is. The Commanders have struggled against good teams lately, and after a hot start, if you look at their schedule, you'll see that they're not as good as the Denver Broncos are playing right now. And I think the Denver Broncos are the better team. I think the Commanders would have a better chance of beating the Philadelphia Eagles, which is their matchup right now, than the Denver Broncos would have of winning in Buffalo.
Yeah.
So, but either one of them, you're talking probably 7 to 10 point underdogs for both of them right now. Good question. Second question. Would you rather have Jaden Daniels or Nix given the choice? And this is going to be a very biased response based on who you're asking. So I'm going to answer first, Nick. Zack, I'm looking at Nick's. My answer to this, I'm gonna cop out on this because this is there is no right answer for this. Both teams are thrilled with who they have. And I think Bo Nix would fit Sean Payton better than Jaden Daniels. And I don't think the Washington Commanders would trade Jaden Daniels for anybody else in the entire class right now.
My answer is another cop-out. Sean Payton wanted Bo Nix, so I want Bo Nix. That's the guy for the system. That's the guy for Sean Payton. And again, if you watch both, Jaden Daniels very fun to watch, very RG3-ish, maybe with a little better of an arm. But Bo Nix is more of that consistent quarterback that you could see leading a team for the next decade. I don't know that I see that necessarily with Jaden Daniels, but you're right, Scott. Both teams are absolutely thrilled right now with how they're developing.
Absolutely, they're thrilled. Neither team wants a do-over. We're happy, you're happy, and that's what you hope for. When you're going into the draft, to come out of this, I need a quarterback. And for both teams, I think both teams are 8-5 right now. I've got the standings in front of me. Washington's 8-5. Nobody was picking the Commanders and Dan Quinn to go 8-5 either.
Yeah.
He's up for he's also up for Coach of the Year. When we start looking at who's done some of the best jobs as far as who are your Coach of the Year candidates, my first answer is Kevin O'Connell, Minnesota Vikings, because who the hell picked the Minnesota Vikings to be 11-2? What are they? 11-2, 10-2 right now? With Sam Darnold? Nobody. And I think Dan Quinn has surprised. I think Sean Payton has surprised. I think Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions could get it as like kind of a lifetime achievement award. It's like, we didn't give it to you when you won 8 games, when you should have won 2. We didn't give it to you when you won 12, when you should have won 6. But we got to give you a Coach of the Year one, so now we're going to give it to you. So he might end up winning that one.
The Broncos also play in a tougher division. That's just factual. I mean, the Cowboys are having a down year. The Giants are the worst team in the NFL. All they really have to compete with I almost said the R word, the Commanders, is the Eagles. And so I don't know. I would still take Bo Nix, but both teams are playing well.
Yeah, you look at their wins, and it started off, Giants, Bengals, Cardinals, Browns, Panthers, Bears, Giants again, Titans. Losses at Buccaneers at the beginning of the season, at Ravens, Steelers, Eagles, Cowboys.
Can't beat the good teams.
They've pretty much lost to every good team they've played. To be fair, someone might look at the Denver Broncos schedule and say, well, you could kind of say the same thing about the Denver Broncos. Yeah, but the Denver Broncos have poleaxed the bad teams on their schedule for the most part. And Cleveland is better with Jameis Winston than they were with Deshaun Watson. There's just no question about that. Deshaun Watson was playing against them. They're a much better team now. They're a 500 team with
they beat Baltimore and Pittsburgh, who the Broncos both.
They're a 500 team with Jameis Winston. They're an 0-17 with Deshaun Watson. Great Jason, good to see you. I skipped a couple people, so I'll come back up to you. Apologies. I saw Michaela and my eyes got big, so I skipped over a little bit. But Jason says with his super chat, just showing some love, guys. Well, thank you, sir. Great to see you in the evening, Scott. Thank you. Yeah, it's about as late as I stay up, so
Scott after dark.
I get in bed after the podcast, so I'm old, man. This team has far surpassed my expectations for the season. Most improved team in the NFL by far. Next week is a huge game. Yeah, I'll be curious again. I think the most improved team for me I'd probably still go Minnesota, but I think they had like a 14-win season like 2 seasons ago. But to be able to do that with Sam Darnold, if we go back and look, who had the biggest delta between preseason expected wins from Vegas, which we know the Broncos was 5.5, and what they finished with, who had the biggest delta? I think the Broncos are going to finish +5, somewhere in that neighborhood. 10 wins would be +4.5. We're going to round up with +5. And I think the Vikings are probably in that neighborhood of 4.5 to 5, and they're going to be +7 or 8. But like I said, the Denver Broncos have surpassed most people's expectations for sure. So thank you, Jason. Want to get back to Taylor. Taylor, good to see you. He says Knicks snubbed for Offensive Rookie of the Month. Knicks should have won it. I don't even know who did win it. I know that Brock Bowers won it. Okay. Maybe they're getting tired, want to spread the love a little bit. Some fatigue, Knicks fatigue. What were Brock Bowers' numbers for?
He had like 330 yards, like 36 catches. I don't know how many touchdowns. But Knicks won Offensive Rookie of the Week 3 times in the month of November. How did he not win Rookie of the Month?
Yeah, that's I don't know. Knicks fatigue. Like I said, you got. I mean, he's, and the thing is he was kind of hit and miss. Brock Bowers, if you look at yards, it was 45 yards, 126 yards, 38 yards, 140 yards, and that 38-yard game. Guess who that was against, Zach?
Broncos.
But Pat Surtain did win AFC Rookie of the Player of the Month, Defensive Player of the Month, and that's why we titled this his he gets a boost to his Player of the Year campaign. Another boost came in with Dexter Lawrence. We wrote that up on milehighhuddle.com, that just kind of a newser, that this guy is playing at Aaron Donald-like levels for a bad team. And he's out for the season, unfortunately. It's just, when it rains, it pours. And you feel bad for Dexter Lawrence, who's toiling away for a bad team and is just playing at a... Nobody's going to complain if Dexter Lawrence had won Defensive Player of the Year. And now he's out of it. And it's a shame for him.
He's been toiling for a while. He's been a very good player for a long time, and I hope he gets out of the Giants' grasp sometime soon.
Cody Dubb talking about Nick Bonito. He says it's the first player since 2014 to hit 10-plus sacks and have a 70-plus yard touchdown. Now, Nick Bonito, it took him some time to get going, Zach, and I was trying to set expectations. I'm on the conservative side, obviously, when it comes to expectations, but there was, some teeth gnashing about Nick Bonito. Like, Nick Bonito was, the 64th overall pick or something. I mean, and when you start digging that low for edge for a premium position, you're banking on traits. What do I mean by that? Is what trait does he have that is a first round trait, but he might be missing something else, or else he'd be in the first round. It's like, oh, well, he's got first round burst and then some. He's got top 10 level burst, but he wasn't big enough. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't capable of holding up at the edge. That's why he falls to the 60s. And you're able to get him then, but you bank on this race. Like, well, listen, the easiest thing in the world to do is get somebody stronger in the weight room. You can't get bursts like that. That doesn't develop. Those guys have that at 16, 17 years old. They've got it. That's God-given. Takes a little bit of time and patience and development. By God, Nick Bonito is playing well because he's learning the craft too. Real quick, and I'll toss it back over to you, Zach. I always said about Bonito, to this point, if you get beat, if you're the left tackle and you get beat to your outside, shame on you. Shame on you. Because that is the only way Nick Bonito is beating you to the quarterback, is if he runs around you. That's not true anymore. That's not true at all anymore. He's beating guys in a variety of ways.
His pass rush arsenal has grown exponentially since he was drafted. And I read something interesting that the pick the Broncos got in the Von Miller trade was used to draft Nick Bonito. I was never the biggest fan. You know, I own that. I put my hand up. I thought he was the B word for a while, but he has exploded onto the scene. And sometimes, Scott, like you mentioned, you can't teach speed. You can't teach athleticism, dynamism, but you can teach how to be stronger and how to improve your pass rushing angles. Sometimes the light bulb just goes off randomly. And once it does, look out.
Yeah, and if he was a top 10 pick, the pressure's on him a little bit more. You know, he's a top 10 guy because you expect those guys to come in right away. If you take an edge, if you take a premium position outside of the top 50, you're not really, what are you expecting from them? If I can get a contributor, you know, if I can get a depth piece, if I can get a guy that can give me quality reps over the course of a game at that position, I'm pretty happy. I don't know that I'm even expecting to get a starter if I'm taking an offensive tackle, basically the third round. I hope I can. I'm going to bank on traits. I'm going to bank on Lucas Kroll because he's a RAS guy, a relative athletic score. Even though he hasn't been a very good football player, he's got height, he's got athleticism that's you can't coach. That's God-given and born. So it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more patience, and Bonito he's just absolutely done it. The Ronk is here too. Good to see you, Michael Ronquillo. We call him the sunrise in the morning because we can count on him just as much as the sun rising for us. Right. Sunset in the evening. So good to see you, Michael. He says, good evening, Zack and Scott on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Go Bo Broncos. And then over on Facebook as well, George Fox coming in with some stars. He says, Scott and Zack, thanks for a fantastic pod. I'm glad we finally have a bye week. Go Broncos. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life and MHH for life. Yeah, Zack, I've said before, what's one of the greatest feelings in the world is whipping somebody's butt on Thursday night and then just enjoying watching the carnage the rest of the weekend. Going into a bye with a 3-game winning streak is probably just as sweet.
and pulling off that kind of thrilling win in front of a national audience in a game that the old Broncos would have lost handily. So it's not good for business, the bye week. It kind of slows down for us, but I'm happy that the Broncos get to heal up and rest up because they need it after 14 weeks.
The fan in you says, okay, I can live with that. Now, did you get a chance to see Shelby Harris's comments?
Oh, yeah.
What were your thoughts about, not even necessarily that he thinks, Jaden Daniels is, I like Jaden Daniels better than Bo Nix. There's your question, Michaela. And everybody's biased. Shelby's probably a little biased also. Jaden Daniels was like 14 of 25 for a touchdown and an interception against the Browns, but he ran 10 times for 85 yards, and Shelby's probably gassed from not being able to catch him. So, and the bitter feelings there with the Broncos, but if you were to say, I'd rather have Jaden Daniels, I'd be like, all right. And frankly, Bo Nix, if you had told me that week 3, I would have rolled my eyes. And now I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see that. I'm not going to argue that with you. That's a valid point. I may think differently, but it's not worth a big shout back, argument like, no, you're wrong. No, that's valid.
To me, there were incomprehensible levels of saltiness Scott. I mean, show me on the doll where Bo Nix hurt you. He came off completely jaded and bitter because the Broncos shipped him off in the Russell Wilson deal. Now he plays for Cleveland. He's nitpicking the rookie quarterback who beat his team. Meanwhile, his own quarterback threw 2 pick sixes and 3 interceptions overall. I thought he came across completely sour grapes. I don't take what he says to heart at all.
Well, and for me, it wasn't just that. It came off as ignorant. So, I used to do some NFL Network stuff, and I've done a lot of TV in the past. And I would be on TV with former players who just had zero ability to evaluate players. It was so. What were Shelby's? If you remember, what were Shelby's criticisms as he's being salty about Bo Nix? Do you remember what he said?
He basically said that Bo Nix can't complete the little passes. It went from Bo Nix can't throw deep to Bo Nix can't complete the small passes. The goalposts are always moving, Scott, and I'm so sick of it. Who is he?
I thought that, like I said, coming off as ignorant. His criticism for Bo Nix he's got a big arm and can hit the deep shot, but he was pretty on the underneath passes and the short passes, he was pretty inefficient. Well, duh, isn't that what we've all been saying since the draft process, that Bo Nix can't throw underneath, that he won't check down, and he's greedy, and he's only trying to go deep? That's what we've been saying for a year. Good Lord, man. Is this the first time you've ever watched Bo Nix play? Holy cow.
Completely ignorant. And I don't who is Shelby Harris to evaluate quarterbacks? And then he was saying it should have been picked off by Denzel Ward, the touchdown to Marvin. It wasn't. But your own quarterback, Shelby, had 2 passes go the other way. So hold that out.
Even if it's just in context, if someone asks you, okay, you've now played against Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, what are your thoughts? Well, I'm not going to talk about Jameis Winston. Okay, that's fine. But to say that Bo Nix's problem is that he relies too much on his big arm, he's got too much Josh Allen in him. What the hell, man? I got a kick out of that one. You know what else I get a kick out of, Zach? I get a kick out of Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. Join over 5 million fans who are already playing on Underdog. With their Pick'em game, you could win money by making entries with your favorite players, compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog.
And with their Champs game, you can win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Like, for example, will Bo Nix have higher or lower than 220 passing yards next week? Will Nix have higher or lower than 1.5 passing touchdowns? Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose, Scott.
So download the Underdog app today and use code MHUDDLE to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, download the Underdog app today and use our code MHUDDLE to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every touchdown, just select higher or lower on Underdog.
Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
I tell you what, listening to the possible prop bets on Underdog about Bo Nix and his ability and the stats he's going to put up, especially at home, the Indianapolis Colts secondary has been poor for a while. And Colts fans, they've about had it with general manager Chris Ballard to what do you have against the secondary? And have you ever had, I feel like this is a little bit with tight ends. The Broncos don't necessarily have a tight end, but it's not for a lack of trying. And Chris Ballard's drafted a bunch of defensive backs, but they still don't have a good secondary. The Broncos, we can say that about the tight end position. I mean, in the last cycle in this generation, you've got Noah Fant, 1st round pick. You've got Greg Dulcich, 3rd round pick. You got Albert Okwuegbunam, 5th round pick. I mean, that's 3 tight ends in the last 7 or 8 years. It's not like we're talking offensive tackle here, Zach, where you just don't draft anybody. They have tried.
Yeah.
It just hasn't necessarily worked. So I like the numbers. Bo Nix could have a nice day at home against the Indianapolis Colts.
I'm surprised Ballard's still there. I agree with you that Shane Steichen's a great coach, but he's not paired with a great general manager. And you're seeing in Denver that can be when you have that simpatico. But the Colts are very beatable. I'm not scared, even though this is a game, Scott, the Broncos have to have. If they want to make the playoffs, you have to beat Indianapolis. I'm not scared of them on offense. I'm not scared of them on defense. This can and will be done.
Yeah, I think, they've got some good weapons on the offensive side of the ball. But I don't trust Anthony Richardson to be able to get it to them. That's why they got a little boost when Joe Flacco came in. They've won a couple with Anthony Richardson, but it feels kind of Tim Tebow-ish, where I'm going to keep it close and maybe I'll get lucky at the end. Because Josh Downs is a good wide receiver. Michael Pittman's a very good wide receiver. And then Jonathan Taylor, when he's healthy, is a very good running back as well. But I like the numbers over there on I like the numbers, and I see Pearl saying, I love the head-to-head. Dang it. I'm like, yeah, I know there's no head-to-head tonight because there's a bye week. If I had more time, I would have been like, all right, let's look at through week 13 last year, where the Denver Broncos rankings on the various categories. I would think they're probably about even on offense. And then defense is just blown away.
Maybe Sunday night we can go through that. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, a good idea. The year-over-year improvements, because I said at the beginning of the season, the numbers that Russell Wilson put up for the Denver Broncos were actually, they're pretty good. Mm-hmm. And some of it just felt, again, scattershot. We just talked about Anthony Richardson. It didn't feel like it was consistent enough, but it was very good in the red zone. It seemed like a lot of the red zone touchdowns were passing touchdowns instead of rushing touchdowns. But I think the overall touchdowns were like 26-9. And I said at the beginning of the season, if you get 26-9 out of Bo Nix, you're talking rookie of the year. That's kind of the pace he's on right now, Zach.
The thing with Russ, though, is like it never felt – it was like the stats with Brock Bowers, like you broke down. He would have a good game, then he would have a bad game. And there would be a fluky Hail Mary to Cortland Sutton from 50 yards down the field that would kind of inflate those numbers. They went on that winning streak, Scott, and then once that ended, you saw the real 2023 Broncos come out. Bo Nix is a more organic quarterback in the sense that you feel like his stats are slowly getting better and ascending. You're not going to get that roller coaster like you had last season.
Yeah, it felt like you're winning through turnovers and backyard football.
Yeah.
There was no game management there, which drives an OCD control freak egomaniac like Sean Payton. And I mean those terms with love because it's gotten him. He's been very, very, very successful that way. He's good. One, he's talented. You can't be like that and not be talented. Otherwise, you have Josh McDaniels. You've got Sean Payton is very talented with all of those aspects too. And a quarterback like Russell Wilson would just, who one read and spin and run was just driving him absolutely bonkers.
We saw the end result. He literally screamed at him and then benched him and then cut him. So you're right, Scott. It's factual.
Yeah, $85 million on that one. And the thing is, we talked about cap hell. Well, this is the cap hell season. Yes, you've got what amounts to be one of the 5 biggest dead cap numbers in NFL history next year with Russell Wilson. But he was due like $50 million, $55 million was his cap hit. So even though you have a $35 million dead cap hit, you got $20 million to spend by moving on from Russell Wilson. If you're giving 4 or 5 of that to Bo Nix, that means $15 million. Well, we looked it up, and I can look it up again real quick. How many guys on your roster do you have making more than $7.5 million as far as cap hits go? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. 5 players on the entire roster with greater than a $7.5 million cap hit. So if I get $15 million back to spend, I can basically put 2 more top 10 players on the field. It adds up. It does. It absolutely adds up. So getting a bunch of money back and hitting on the quarterback
So
has
big.
helped get you out of cap hell.
I don't think George Payton gets enough credit for the situation that he's guided the Broncos through, dealing with the dead cap with Russell Wilson, but also making some smart signings like Brandon Jones, who didn't break the bank, Josh Reynolds before he got cut. But when you hit on the quarterback, like you said, you have that rookie contract, you have a franchise guy making relative peanuts, it helps you out. I just am so excited. 85 million dead cap. It was supposed to be a rebuilding 5-win year. Imagine how good the Broncos could be when they get Bo Nix a weapon not named Cortland Sutton. They get him some running help. They get him some tight end help. They get him another receiver. When they have more money to play with, like Scott was talking about. If they're this good now, imagine the future. So exciting.
Yeah, and it'll be fun. The offseason, we joke all the time. It's like, Nick and I, it's like, I don't care about the games as much. I like the general manager aspect of it. And I'm really looking forward to this offseason with the Denver Broncos with a full slate of draft picks and a bunch of money. That January, February, March, April, and May should be a blast on MHH. May is quieter, but it'll be the reactions to the draft at the end of April. So I expect it to be a lot of fun. You could be playing meaningful football all the way through January this year for a change.
And this is the first offseason I can recall in almost a decade where the Broncos won't be going on a GM search, a head coaching search, or a quarterback search. So they can just build the nest around Bo Nix. It's going to be exciting, like Scott said.
So this is kind of your 2-minute warning, and we're at 36 minutes. So if you've got any burning desires or things you want to get off your chest or you want us to read out, make sure you get your super chats or stars in, and we'll make sure to get them going. I guess one of the other things I want to say, and we hit on this a little bit, is the Pro Bowl voting and the name recognition. There weren't any Denver Broncos leading their positional groups, and that's okay, except Pat Surtain should be that guy. Pat Surtain should be the number 1 vote getter in the NFL at the cornerback position. That one I will go on. I mean, the 2 guys that are widely considered the 2 best corners in the league are him and Sauce Gardner. And it ain't Sauce this year. It's still Pat.
It adds credence to your point earlier about Bonito being a year away from that name recognition, because look with PS2, he's the best corner in the NFL and he still can't get the Pro Bowl votes. So I encourage everyone out there on social media to go hashtag Pro Bowl vote, list the Broncos, and fire it out there. They have to be taking the lead soon, Scott, in some categories.
Yeah, and I think, the flash stats out there, again, Bonito might actually end up with a better chance down the road. They're both young. As far as because of it's just easier to rack up stats at edge. If I don't hear Pat Surtain's name all game, he just had an all-pro day.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's really hard to get recognized if you're not being recognized. Anonymity is his best friend. How am I supposed to get plaudits by doing my job to the point that no one ever says my name? Riddle me this.
That's a very meta of you, Scott, to consider. I feel like I'm in philosophy class right now. Makes you think.
Yeah, and I think going back to I've talked about the job that Vance Joseph has done, and the system and the buy-in and the communication and the understanding has helped so many different players. Now that Bonito is starting to rise to the top, you don't get 50 sacks because Bonito has 10. There's a bunch of guys that are contributing to this. Jonathan Cooper's having a breakout season. We know Zack Allen. I love Malcolm Roach. See Malcolm Roach out there. I see Jonah Ellis coming in. I think, everybody wants to throw this on Levi Wallace, but I think it also helps to show you the job that Vance Joseph has done coordinating a defense when you remove a piece and you put a guy in there that doesn't really understand, he isn't just ready to go, and things go so poorly in one area. And again, that's Levi Wallace can play better than he did against the Browns. And yes, Scott, I know it would be hard for him to be much worse, but he can play considerably better, but it'll be good to get Riley Moss back.
Yeah, I mean, he's coaching everyone up and making everyone better, and that's you mentioned Nick Bonito. The thing is, he wasn't even drafted to start. It was supposed to be Baron Browning as the next Von Miller, and who even remembers Baron Browning now because Nick Bonito broke out? But you have contributors like Scott talked about. Also, John Franklin Myers, another great pickup by George Payton, helping out with the front line. So I give VJ his flowers every week, except maybe this week. But it's just one player, and hopefully Riley Moss does come back.
Yeah, and who you just mentioned was Franklin Myers is low key one of the best acquisitions in the NFL, not just for the Denver Broncos, because after Bo Nix, I think John Franklin Myers would be he would be my next. Who's the most important new Denver Bronco? John Franklin Myers. I like Devon Bailey a lot, and then the stuff that he's been able to do. But John Franklin Myers has made the guys across him better. We said DJ Jones had a bad season last year. He was good in 2022, regressed last year. Why? Because he's forced to play more in the middle instead of in a gap where he's taking on the center and a guard every single time instead of trying to split that gap. And it's just been such an upgrade that it's made the entire front three better. And then, the work ethic and motor of Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito on the outside, it's just been a lot of fun.
Well, it's improving the front line. How often did we talk about that last year, the last couple years? Who was it they had starting at defensive end? Before that, it was Deshaun Elliott, Jonathan Harris.
They had they had Jonathan Harris.
When you have him starting, your line can't be that good. But when DJ Jones is like your second or third string, that's pretty good. And that's, it's all about depth. And VJ is getting the most out of every player except for number 39.
And Awazarike is even starting to contribute as well. It's like the collective for me just is so much better than the individual talent outside of Pat Surtain, who is all pro. He's going to be a superstar whoever he's playing for the most part. That I think if I'm doing, and they do have this award as far as position coaches of the year, assistant coaches of the year, I guess is what I'm trying to spit out. Vance Joseph should absolutely be in the running for on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, assistant coach of the year. They could have the coach of the year in Sean Payton. They could have the defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain. They could have the offensive rookie of the year in Bo Nix. Look at us, Scott. Who would have thought that a year ago or 6 months ago?
Something about coaching. I just looked up Baron Browning and was curious because, Nick and I had talked about, what do you get for Baron Browning? What would you take for Baron Browning? I said maybe a 6th. It was about it just because he can't stay healthy and he's coming off a contract. I mean, like, what are you looking for here? So he's actually played in the last 3 Arizona games, and he's got 5 total tackles and a tackle for loss and a quarterback hit. So he has gotten back out there. Good for him. Nobody's wishing ill will of Baron Browning. And if he reaches, let me have this last discussion, and then we're going to get out of here. It was, I think it was Coach Chris in the morning, or it might have been Troy, one of our morning regulars, was like, I'm tired of seeing Bronco players leave and then go star somewhere else. And I think that just felt because Jerry Jeudy had a big game, and I still think that's addition by subtraction. But other than Jerry Jeudy, who's left? Who has the Broncos let go of or moved on from that you really, really regret? Anybody? I mean, I was like,
can't think of one.
We go Von Miller. Well, you got a good return on Von Miller, and he was coming up. His contract was coming up too, and he was older. Bradley Chubb, that was a first-round pick. You turned into Sean Payton. He was out of contract too. He was a free agent. Tim Patrick, yeah, I probably would have liked to see Tim Patrick here, but
you got Baylor.
Was I going to bet a roster spot on his knees?
Right.
No, we're all happy for him, and hopefully, if the Broncos don't get a ring, hopefully Tim Patrick gets one with the Detroit Lions. That'd be great. Shelby Harris, Noah Fant, Drew Lock, these guys that we've moved on from, for the most part, go back to Philip Lindsay, who most of the time the decisions have been validated. Albert Okwuegbunam has a huge preseason finish. I don't think he's been on the field since in 2 years, so done a pretty good job with who they've decided to hold on to and let go.
Really good point. I mean, I can go back to Isaiah McKenzie, which predates your time on the beat, Scott. But the Broncos, he was a bust. He couldn't hold on to a punt. Then he goes to Buffalo and becomes like a gadget player. That's the best example I can think of. But you're right. They have good scouting and evaluation to know who to resign and who to let walk. Even Simmons, no one's missing him because you have Brandon Jones.
All right. So I think on that note, we're gonna hop on out of here. Any final thoughts? Are you ready to just to get us going and enjoy a good football weekend?
I'm ready to watch the game tonight, unless anyone else has any super last minute. I'm going to get through my little spiel here. Another tremendous episode as always. Can't believe it's been almost 46 minutes of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on X at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on X at Mile High Huddle. Follow Scott at Scout Kennedy, myself at Kelberman NFL, and also Chad Jensen at Chad and Jensen. If you haven't done so, please cop some merch like we're rocking each and every podcast at mhhmerch.com. Also, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football priest and our Deacon Scott a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please, very important, you subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
Just like y'all. As we're getting out of here, I want to say thank you to our Super Chat superstars. We couldn't do this without y'all. Normally I say it keeps the lights on, which it does. You can see the reflection of my glasses. And I normally say it keeps my forehead nice and shiny, but I covered that big Peyton Manning forehead up today at night. It shines in the morning. We put hats on in the evening. But want to say thank you to David McElrath for getting us started over here on Facebook, Sam Bam, Taylor Christensen, Kobe, the sunrise and sunset, because Michael's closing us out here. He's saying great show tonight. Zack and Scott on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Go Bo Broncos. Thank you, sir. George Fox was in here. He says, thanks for a fantastic pod. Jason Kopp wanted to show us a little bit of love, and we thank you for that too. And of course, the Duchess, red hot pink here, the fuchsia, and had a couple of great questions that spawned some good conversation. So thank you as always. And I hope y'all have a great football weekend. Enjoy some time off watching some no stress football. Just enjoy it this weekend.
Scott, I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you Sunday. I don't know if it's me and you Sunday or Chad and I Sunday, but regardless, we will see you Sunday for another episode of the Mile High Huddle podcast. Have a great start to your weekend. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.